What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Majority. Just getting out from feeling a little bit under the weather. A little sick still, but I'm going to hold through to give you my post-play impressions of Shin Megami Tensei Persona 4. Ain't that a title and a half? I did just beat this game several days ago. And I know that everyone and their mother has played Persona 4 at this point, but somehow I haven't. So I intend to at least discuss it. I'll review it later, maybe after I play it again, and see how I feel about it. If my feelings still resonate, the same. Now, first off, thank you to Boston Burr for sending me this game. I watched your review of the anime, and you had said that the game on the PS2 was one of your favorite RPGs for the console. So I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me. Thank you for sending me a treasured game of yours, like a game that you really enjoyed. Now, I did just beat this, and the interesting thing about this is that I've been playing this since he sent it to me, and that was like 3 or 4 months ago. And I know Shin Megami Tensei games are known for their length. They are lengthy games, and this one is no exception. Took me about 55 hours on the clock, on the in-game clock, and a few things did expand that, like a little, unnecessarily and artificially, but we'll get to that later. I do want to say that this game captivated me to really play through it all the way. And not a lot of games do that. A lot of times I'll start a game and then I just won't finish. I don't know what happens. I get sidetracked. This game was not the case. It's actually a much more streamlined experience. In fact, I played Shin Megami Tensei 4 on the 3DS and stopped at about 70 hours in, which I know that's quite a resume, but because it was unclear. This game is really easy to get back into. Like, you take a break for a week, you know what you gotta do. It's pretty clear. And that's the big thing. Also, what really makes it, easy and enjoyable to go back to is 100% the story, characters. It's all pretty fascinating and is set in somewhat of like a rustic Japanese setting, but one that almost mirrors, a real social life of an individual, like, a teenager or something, because it is set in a school setting. And it's interesting because this game is rated M for mature, but, you're playing as, like, these underage kids, and, the perfect time to play this would probably be in your formative years in high school, but all the same, as a young adult, I do still enjoy playing Persona 4. It kind of touches on some interesting themes, and I'm not really trying to spoil too much, but do know that this is darker than the school setting might make it out to be, and like the teenage adolescent thing that's going on. It is very mature. The writing is very well done. It really feels like these are actual persons, in the game, acting out the roles, and that's what really makes it so special, is that you can almost relate to the characters on a personal level. And that's kind of the interesting thing here, is you've got the main narrative, which is set in a very dark setting. This is a Shin Megami Tensei game. And Persona, I realize that Persona is also pretty dark. But then you've also got the interactions on a social level with the different characters. Your characters bond through what we call social links. And no, that is not a sexually transmitted disease, but it does sound like one. And I like these, not so much for what they do for your combat, which is, add to your, your combat strength between you and your partners, like the friends that you make, here on the cover. But it gives you an extra, story to get into, to really discover more about the backgrounds and the thinkings of these different characters and kind of watch them evolve. And that's what makes it fascinating. It's not just these guys, too. It has to do with, other characters in the game, based around your school setting, your home setting. You are a transfer student, this little hipster right here, and you basically move to the town from the city, and everyone takes a liking to you, or not. And the game really starts from there, and you end up going undercover, investigating a bunch of mysterious events, and that's as far as I'm getting into the main narrative. Chances are you and your mother have played this, so you know what I'm talking about. But what's interesting is how the story and the characters and the world interact with the combat. It's interesting. And I don't think that the combat and, you know, the action is the takeaway point here, but it is good. It's definitely competent. It is a dungeon crawler, so you go through stages, you know, through like different levels, descending or ascending to reach a boss. And this, you know, this works and it doesn't work. Now, you do use personas, and if you are familiar with Shin Megami Tensei, they're basically demons. You know, demons that you acquire. But that's kind of a stretch, because these are like, you know, personal personas, like the ones that you develop. But then, as the main character, you have a chance to acquire new ones. Your side characters, can't change them. And that's not really an issue. It works fine, you know, they have their strengths and weaknesses, and you play up to them. Decide which characters are your favorites and, you know, use them, or, you know, mix it up. Use a good variety. Now, I said that the dungeon crawling aspects, you know, they work and they don't work because the save system, and another thing that works against you here, you have to save outside of the building, and basically what you'll have to do is carry a bunch of items to escape the dungeon, and if you don't, you risk dying and losing all your progress up from the last save, and that can be troublesome. Only because your main character is a wimp. And I mean that in that if your main character goes down, the whole team goes down. And that can be really annoying for two reasons. This is getting deeper and deeper here. Well, the first reason is that, you know, a lot of times enemies can just gang up on you, and that, you know, that can be annoying if they all single you out and you haven't had a chance to recover, something of that nature. But it's even worse when you miss a preemptive attack. This game utilizes preemptive attacks where you basically like swing at the enemy before you even go into the combat, and if you mess that up, if they hit you before you hit them, or something like that, they get the advantage and they get to go first, and then maybe they'll get another turnaround, like, you know, because they're faster than your character. And the preemptive strikes, I like them and I don't like them. You know, it's good when you get it, but then when you don't, it's just aggravating. And, you know, I don't have anything against preemptive strikes really, but the way this one is done is kind of weird. You have to hit the enemy from behind. You have to hit them at the back spot. And that's, it's here and there. I mean, I was able to get through the game no problem. I did lose about 5 hours of progress, and that's what I was saying before is, you know, I have 55 hours on the clock, but I've lost more because of stupid deaths. And that can be annoying. Another thing is because you're constantly rotating your personas, your team members, as the main character, you constantly open up yourself to different weaknesses. You have advantages because you have a bigger array of attacks to go from, but you also make yourself more vulnerable. And it's harder to concentrate, you know, on just one persona for your main character, while your team members' personas are all leveling up much faster because they stick with that one. So you can't really switch it up. And that's where things get problematic, is because, you know, the fusion system, which is emblematic of Shin Megami Tensei, fuse two personas together to make a stronger one, relies heavily on you acquiring new personas and training them. So basically, you'll watch your team members get way stronger than your characters. They do balance this out by giving your main character his own stats, like hit points and magic points, but the individual values for your personas will be based on how they level up. Again, I mean, it's here and there. It works out, you know, but from a combat perspective, I prefer a traditional Shin Megami Tensei game. I like the 3DS one. In fact, I might consider going back and replaying that at some point. This one was still fun, and I give this one the advantage over SMT4 because it has a far more invoking narrative, and it really pulls you in. It makes you want to get into it. If I was going to describe the game in one word, it would be juicy, because it makes you want to keep going into it and discovering more and like learning more about the characters. It is very mature, so it's like you don't know what to expect next. It is kind of predictable sometimes where it's going, and sometimes it moves too slow. But at the end of the day, it's full of surprises and it's full of attitude, and I love that. I think of this game as a spiritual successor to Shenmue, with like a Resident Evil camera style, if that makes any sense. Now, Atlas is a subsidiary of Sega, which is why I make the Shenmue comparison. But I talk about Resident Evil here because the camera frames, they're very still, at least in the open world, not in the dungeon crawling. And you basically, you walk around the camera and you get, an interesting perspective because of that. It's very Japanese. If you ever watch Japanese cinema, it's a trademark of the culture to use still frames and long shots. And you'll notice this during the cutscenes as well. It feels very homely, and it feels like the cultural aspect was preserved over localization. As was the translation, because like I said, the translating here is very convincing, and it feels, on point. I really like that about this game, is that it has that strong sense of character, and I know a lot of RPGs at the time were getting shoddy translations. Not this game. This game has, high quality translations, high quality story, characters. It's not the most beautiful game you're going to play on the PS2, but the load times are great. And again, it has a lot of character. You go through these different, settings, encountering different demon personas, and while the personas themselves lack a little bit of character, they don't have that same kind of mythological tie-in as the ones in SMT4. They don't have that sense of history. The challenge is still there. Now, I've been talking, with various people about this game on the internet. I talked with Leo the Funny Nerd, and he tells me that this game is the easiest of the series, or of, any SMT game. And while that might be so, it's still a challenging game, because like I said, I lost a lot of hours of progress in here. And I was only playing on normal. Now, if you know what you're doing, it's not as bad, but in one moment you could lose your life to an instant kill, attack because your persona was vulnerable to it. And that's what makes this tough to get into if you're not accustomed to playing RPGs and challenging RPGs. Still, I do recommend playing on normal if you've played, RPGs here and there, because it gives a hearty challenge. That being said, once we get to the ending, I felt it ended a bit short. Now, it gives you a choice to see, to give you different endings. And the ending I picked, because you don't you don't really know it at the time that you're going into the ending, but the one that I picked did not seem right at first. It seemed like maybe there was more gameplay, and I was pissed off because I thought, oh, maybe there was something I could have done to expand the storyline to keep playing, because at that point I just wanted to keep playing, and that's how you know it's a good game, is when you want to keep playing even after 55 hours in. But after the credits rolled and it was done, I began thinking about it, and I was thinking maybe I made the right choice. It was a tough call. And this will bring me to something else in a minute. But I talked to Jason about this, and he had told me that, he asked me first, when I told him I finished the game, he said, did you get the good ending? I was like, oh, I knew there were two endings, but which one's the good one? And I didn't actually ask him. I don't know, per se, what the other one is, but I know that we both didn't know what we were doing at the time. When we got to that ending point, it didn't really make sense at the time what was going on, and maybe we had our different reasons for thinking that, but yeah, I'm not spoiling anything. Go play it for yourself, find out, because it's really unsettling, and that's what I like about this game, is that it's unsettling. As the main character, it does give you choices for dialogue that kind of let you flesh out how some of the other character dialogue goes along, but it's never really detrimental towards the future of the game, what happens in the game. Not as far as I could tell. It didn't seem that way anyway. But again, this game, is fresh, right? It's got a lot of fresh dialogue in there. The characters are always spunky. Now, it does touch a little bit on gender roles. And while I don't usually like that, I don't like this, sensitive to gender stuff coming up in my games, it never felt very social justice-y, this is for hurrah for gay rights. No, it wasn't like that, but it was funny. It was humorous in a way, And, you know, it takes shots at both sides, and it's always very playful. So, I mean, it's not doing any harm. And, I mean, if anyone is going to do this, I say let it be Atlas. Because these guys, you know, they have spunk. Any other company, you know, who would do it, they would butcher it. But that's just me saying that. So, at the end of the day, would I recommend Persona 4? Absolutely. Especially for the value you can get this game at. I know, you know, like I said, everyone and their mothers played and bought this, so you can get this at a great deal. And if you've never played a Persona game before and are looking to get into one, I don't feel this is too, you know, this is not archaic at all. It's very easy to get into. Like I said, it's just an easy play, and if you like narrative in your games, this will do for you. There's an anime out there, but you should probably play the game first. Like I said, it preserves that character very well, and you feel like you're almost in a TV show. And I don't know, I really liked it for that. Would I play it again? This is a tough call because SMT games are long, but I do want to. I do want to play it again, maybe in like 6 months. I want to play some other stuff first, just put this aside for now. It was great. I loved it. I love the story. The music, you know, it's homely. It gives me like a very playing in a Japanese setting kind of feel. But there are things I didn't like about it and things I kind of just want to break from. I wish there was more adventuring. You know, you're kind of sequestered to basically 5 strips of the main town. And you don't really get to explore that much. You do get to do combat if that's your thing and grind, but for the normal difficulty, it really wasn't necessary. And the other thing that makes this game take such a long time is that it's on a schedule. You know, you go day by day. And, you know, you can basically just push your way through the day by, like, saving, going through the school setting, whatever. But you have to be patient. I mean, I'm patient. I had no problem with this. But you have to sit through a lot to just get through the game. And a lot of times it's like you know, it doesn't seem like it's worth just grinding for no reason. Like, it didn't really make sense. And I didn't like the methods for, you know, building your character attributes to enhance the kind of things that you could do in the game. It was like too convoluted for itself. There's just so much going on here. And it's not that it's hard to understand. It's just that I don't want to say it's too many ideas into one game, but I don't know. At the end of the day, I just prefer simplicity. But it's still a great game, and I recommend playing it. I will play it again before I do the full review. This is just some post-play impressions. Let me know what you thought of the game. Do you like Persona 4? Do you think it butchers this series? I know a lot of you out there are not fans of Persona 4. This is our last official Persona release since... well, you know what I'm trying to say. This is the last new Persona game we got that was, you know, mainline game until Persona 5, which is coming out next year. So are you excited for that? Are you going to buy a PS4 for Persona 5? Or do you prefer the SMT series? Do you like the SMT as it is and feel this is just too hipsterish? I don't know. Lots of questions. Hey, but this game raises more questions than it does answers, and that's what makes it so intriguing to me. So thank you. Hope you enjoyed. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and take care. Peace. Persona! What's the matter? Never seen a Crack Lotus video before?